Okay, so can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
And what does it say?
Psychology is weird.
Okay.
Psychology is weird.
So raise your hand if you are weird. I'm gonna raise mine as soon as I find the. Okay. I'm gonna actually raise my hand instead of virtually raise my hand. Okay, so psychology is weird, and I'm in favor of being weird because I'm weird myself. But my science should not be weird. And so that's basically what I'm going to talk about and steps that I've been taking in my work to get rid of the weirdness. Now, without saying, does anyone here know what that means? Without saying, does anyone know what it means that psychology is weird? Nobody knows?
I have a hint.
You have a hint?
It's
Anybody else?
Okay, don't say it. Okay.
Anybody else have an inkling of a hint? Okay. Well, I'll just get rid of the suspense right now. Psychology is weird refers to the research populations that we have when we conduct social science, behavioral, neuroscientific, cognitive psychology research, which is the kind of psychology that I practice. Is that what you were going to say, Wilson?
Close.
Okay. Yes. So you're on the right track.
Yes.
So I'm here to talk about why it matters that psychology is weird and how to fix it. So the first letter stands for Western. So by and large, most of the research is conducted on people of Western backgrounds. There's not a lot of Middle Easterners. There's not a lot of Asians. There's not even that many Europeans, but there are some. For the most part, it's just kind of a very homogenous looking cohort. The next thing it is these particular research subjects tend to be educated. So they tend to go to the best high schools because the research universities that put out the most amount of publications tend to have a very. Tawan, is your hand up on purpose?
Oh no, it's not.
Okay. I was like, do you have a question already? So they tend to be very educated. Either they're going to a private school or they're at the top of the class, something that enabled them to get into a really good school, an R1 or R2 university. The next thing is they come from countries that tend to be industrialized. So for the most part, they have everything they need, and there's not a lot of disparity between, let's say, quote, the city versus the not city. For example, here in Egypt, I have a team that I work with. I found them somehow. They live in a village, and even though they go to a university that is, quote, in their town, unquote, the infrastructure is such that it takes them 2.5 hours one way to get to class, to get to school. So on a lot of days, they just don't even bother going. And in a lot of places like this, that there's not even cars. And when they came to visit me here in Cairo, pretty basic things that we take for granted they had not done, gone to the movies, eaten Chinese food, had pizza, had never done any of these things. So none of these people are represented in the psychology literature for the most part. They also tend to be rich. So the universities are rich because they have a lot of money and a lot of resources for doing research, but the people tend to be rich too because they have to afford it, and they tend to come from countries that are democratic. And I don't have time to go into it completely, but believe it or not, that actually changes people's mindset when you come from a democratic place that promotes individual rights. And as if that were not enough, they all tend to be English speaking, so there's not a lot of bilinguals, and they tend to be young, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. I have no problem with 21-year-olds, but that can't really inform the psychology of a 60, 70, 81-year-old person. So this is actually a problem that psychology realizes it has. So according to Schultz, they actually tracked the reason for it. It relates to the church and the spread of the church and the policies around marriage. But basically, there is documented substantial psychological variation. Heinrich et al. Says we have to stop doing our research on Westerners, and Huang et al., who does research on Chinese people, says that even cross-cultural psychology is saturated with a Western-centric bias. So it's a known problem that we have. So the the real question I want to ask is, does this really matter? So why we need to fix it, and does it really matter? So the research that I do involves what you would think pretty basic interacting with people that is not going to be, it's not going to be affected by culture. Okay, so I'm just going to pick on somebody right now. Anita, are these two circles on the inside the same size?
No.
Which one's bigger?
The one on the inside, you're saying? Well,
Yep.
from my screen, it's on my left side.
This one right here is bigger?
It looks
Okay.
bigger.
Okay, great. Barbara, can I pick on you next?
Yes.
Okay, so looking at these two circles, can you tell me which one is darker?
Okay, since I've maybe taken a similar test, I would say that the one on my right is darker, but probably they're the same shade.
Okay, you're absolutely
It's
right,
the
Barbara.
context. It's the context. Yes.
Oh, see, you want to give the presentation? Very nice.
No,
Oh, that's
no,
exactly
you're doing
right.
just fine. I appreciate what you're saying.
So it is the context, right? This one looks darker because of the context, and this one looks bigger because of the context. So even our perception matters based on what it is that we're used to seeing. What do you see here, Wilson? I'm going to call on you. This is your turn to get picked on.
I've seen this before. That's the lady turning on her head on the side.
Yeah. Do you see an
I
old
can
woman
see
or a
it.
young woman?
I see a middle-aged woman.
Okay. Okay, you're going to split the difference, huh? Subi, what do you see?
I
You're
see a
muted.
younger woman. I see a
You see a
younger
young
woman.
woman? Yeah. Okay. So her
Yeah.
head is turned, right? Okay.
Yep.
So raise your hand if you cannot see the old woman. Okay. So those of you that cannot see the old woman, what I want you to pay attention to is this right here is the woman's nose. These are her eyes, and that's her
Yes.
mouth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Oh,
Of the old woman.
The old woman,
Yeah.
correct.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So here's what's really crazy. I actually showed this to some of my Middle Eastern students here in Egypt, and one boy, so this just proves my point, raised his hand and said, "I see a young man." And I said, "What are you talking about? Like, there's not even a man depicted here." And explained that certain of the headdresses that they wear in some of the countries here, when they don't have the band around it, the way that it falls on their head is like this. He's like, "I see a young boy." So tell me context doesn't matter. He didn't see a woman at all. He saw an actual boy based on his experiences. So the reality is every single experience that we have affects something as minute as perception and how we perceive something. Okay, so I'm going to move really rapidly into my research so I don't take too much time. So I study Tetris. Tetris is a video game. And I don't actually study Tetris. I use Tetris as a tool to study learning. And it's actually been used for the past 30 years to understand human cognition. And I'm sure you guys have seen this before, right? It's a very old classic video game. The blocks fall from the top, you put them together, you clear lines, you move on with your life. And more with more lines you clear, it falls faster and faster and faster. What I was hoping to show you was a video of what novices look like versus experts look like, but I think that's going to take too much time. So just trust me when I tell you that most people that play, most of us normal people, we play at a rate of maybe a piece every 10 or 15 seconds. The experts who I study in the field and compete against each other professionally, they play at a second every 2/3 to 1/3. I'm sorry, a piece every 2/3 to 1/3 of a second. So they're actually dropping pieces about as fast as your eyes can move. And so to watch them do it is crazy. So, but we can learn a lot about human cognition because the skill learning curve is so long. Okay, so what does this have to do with context? Oh, I have a video here, but I'm not going to show you because it's going to take too long. So just so you know, we're not actually just looking at, hey, are they scoring Tetrises? There's a lot of detail that goes into the measurements. I have a research version of the game that I have people play, and it records in real time more than 100 different features and metrics. which latent factor analysis has indicated 35 to be the most important. This is the most boring slide of all of them. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but this is just to show you all of the things that we are recording as someone plays, so we can really, really get very deep into the task to understand human cognition. So this figure right here on the right illustrates some of the features that we look at. So the max height, for example, is just the highest point. The mean height is the average. We look at the number of pits, which are covered holes. The perimeter is the jaggedness. We look at, if I were to drop a piece here, just one side is touching versus 3 sides versus 7 sides here. And then some of the latencies, how long before they initiate working with the piece. Right. So what you'll find as an expert, particularly with some pieces, they'll take a second because they're deciding before they waste movements what it is they're going to do with it, and then they'll start moving the piece. Those are the semi-experts. The pros have already made the decision and are simply executing that. So we're measuring a whole lot of things while they're actually playing. Okay. So moving forward, of those 135 are actually important, and latent factor analysis has indicated 3 main factors that are representative of Tetris skill. These relate to board structure, how someone plans for Tetrises, and how they make placement decisions, and this determines skill. Okay, so what I did was I compared Arabic English bilinguals and English speakers switching between regular and upside down versions of the Tetris game, believing that Arabic speakers would have an advantage. Why would Arabic speakers have an advantage? This is a $64,000 question right now. Why would Arabic speakers have an advantage? Yes. Subi, do you want to say?
The alphabet going right to left.
Correct. So if
Yeah.
you switch back and forth all day long, and I see my students do it, right? They'll be even in one app, right to left with Arabic and left to right with English and all of this stuff. They're going back and forth. So in my view, there's a lot of advantages to being bilingual that have been documented that don't even have to do anything with reading. One of them might actually be switching between different orientations of the same task. So Usubi's actually right. But I was wrong, and it was not the case. But here's the thing: it wasn't that they were equal. The English speakers were better. The English monolinguals who don't switch all the time were somehow better at switching between different orientations of Tetris, which made no sense to me. So the answer was not in text direction at all. So I started digging a little deeper because I understand the cultural context, and the reason was orthographic. Really, really quickly, orthographic means how things spell. So English is a pain in the butt because we have all of these exceptions and all of these rules and all of these pronunciations that are different, and it just makes no sense. And people that learn English as a second language are often frustrated by English and all of its exceptions. Voweled Arabic, on the other hand, is very, very shallow, meaning it's just a one-to-one relationship. You can basically just read it because it reads like it spells. But a lot of times they don't actually put the vowel sounds there. You have to know by the context, right? So for someone like me who's trying to learn to read it, I don't know the context well enough to know. I'm still sounding out the words. And so, but they know, so they have to go by the context. And then add to that they use different ways of chatting that mix the 2 languages, and they have a lot of orthographic switching. So what I actually realized is that they're not switching between text direction. I mean, they are, but that's not what's sticking in their head and giving them a different context. They're actually switching between different orthographies. What does that have to do with Tetris? What that has to do is the orthography of the game is the board structure, the pattern of how the pieces are actually fitting together. Are they having one-to-one relationships? Is it straightforward? Is it understanding? And what I actually found was in the long run, they would be much better. This experiment took me 2 weeks per person. In the long run, had it gone for 4 weeks, they would have been much better because they were learning the pattern of the game, the underlying pattern of the game, whereas the English speaking people were just learning how to do Tetrises, which is going to make your score artificially higher. So this blew my mind because I'm thinking psychology is weird. Oh, this doesn't matter for me. I just do Tetris. Psych, right? Like clearly something is going on here. Okay. So how do we fix it? Oh, sorry. I wanted to say that the representation in the literature is very, very poor for the Middle East and, of course, all of the stereotypes that we have. But how can we have more diverse populations in psychology? Well, the first thing that I decided to do was create a mobile version of my game, which I got permission from the Egyptian government to give to anybody in the country. And so this is the English version of my game, and this is the Arabic version of my game. And people can play, and I get all of the data, but the thing is it's on their phone, right? So one of the reasons why it's hard to get non-weird populations is they're all stuck at R1 schools, right? All of the researchers are there and they just use the kids in their psychology classes. Well, of course they're not going to have diverse population because those kids are weird, right? They're rich, they're educated, they're whatever else. If we have more research solutions that are based on mobile applications, we can collect a lot more data. In addition to that, I am working on trying to get eye tracking in my mobile device so that I can confirm exactly where the person is looking when they do the research. So here's a member of my research team. By the way, I try to hire locally whenever I need developers. This is a gentleman who he lives in Egypt, but he works in Saudi Arabia, and he's helping me find a solution. And as you can see, his facial features are being tracked by the application as he actually plays the game. So I can get really, really detailed measurements. So this is my solution for how to fix the weird problem in psychology. All right, so I just rushed through all of that because I only had 5 to 7 minutes. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Jackie, that
I
was,
did, Jackie.
yeah,
Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, you said and I put it in the chat, is you said the representation of,
Oh, I see the chat.
assume you
Yep.
mean of people, of studies about people in the Middle East are slim, I think you said are few or something. Is
Yeah.
that the same? Are they slim in the Middle East, or is it just here in the West, Europe, North America that we don't
It's-
get the studies?
It's the proportion of total articles featuring these populations in the literature as a whole,
Mhm.
right? So yes, research is being done here, but the output isn't quite the same. And even here, it's not the same because most of the research, about a quarter of the research, so there's 18 countries that make up the Middle East, North Africa. A quarter of the literature comes from Saudi Arabia.
wow.
So it's not even completely even here. So
Mhm.
just the general body, there's just not representation. Eye tracking stuff is scary, but interesting. Emma, yeah, you're right. I probably might not use my own application. Okay.
Jackie, can you go back one slide to
Yeah.
have that last slide up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a solution for this eye tracking? Like,
Cute.
is there something that you want to use already?
Well, wait a minute now. Q might want to actually do my study. You used to be an addict?
Tetris.
You used to be a Tetris addict?
Yeah. That was a long time ago.
Okay. All right now. Okay,
I-
so let's converse after this. It's on my phone.
Oh,
Right.
cool.
I will just send you the application and then you can actually play. This is awesome. Okay.
Come back.
Say again?
I could bring my addiction back.
Yeah. Okay, so I was answering someone's question, then I'm going to go to Emra. Can you just repeat the last question? Oh, Osubi, you asked if there was a solution?
Yeah, is there a solution that you have already for the eye tracking?
That's what I'm currently working on. So I had a conversation with my developer, and to my knowledge, this does not exist anywhere at all in the world, right? Like there's not a lot of people trying to get eye tracking in mobile applications so that they can do perceptual research.
I don't believe it, but okay.
Well, with Tetris, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's probably eye tracking that they're secretly doing on us. Emra, I want to know your comments or questions.
Yeah, so Jackie, this is quite interesting, and I'm kind of like wondering. So, my question is like I'm kind of like now trying to understand whether this is just the language or the script, or is it the culture, or is it a combination of a little bit of the both that affect our perception? So, I mean, I guess my question is like, do you plan on cross-checking this with other scripts?
So
Like-
that's a really good question. And so I would need to cross-check it with other bilingual people who had similar text direction and also similar orthography. So like French, for example, and then maybe other text directions that had more transparent orthography, but proceed it differently. It's like, say, for example, Japanese. And I have all of these wonderful plans to do so. But one of the reasons psychology is weird is because that means we have to travel to the locations and actually do it somehow. So now that I have it on the phone, I'm really hoping to be able to get access to these populations and figure out what the reason is. But if you have thoughts, I'd like to know them. We could take this offline if you'd like.
Yeah, I think, it's not just language. I believe I would go with a more holistic approach to how, our perception is educated. Language is definitely, a big part, like your research illustrates, but I think, it also is related to how, we educate our children and, how we actually, learn, to make sense of the world. So I'm kind of like looking at the larger forest. You're looking at this tree of the language, but I think it may kind of like yield a much rewarding result if you kind of like, if there's a way that we can figure out whether this is like part of a larger culture, or just the language itself. To
Yeah.
me, I mean, I feel like this is like a reflection. Language is a reflection of a much larger, a much broader kind of like cultural identity. So I'm just kind of like wondering if we can get somewhere with this idea.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. It's really hard to test multiple variables at once. That's right. Like that's really the issue. Like how do we even quantify perceptual acculturation? I don't even I don't even know where to begin. So I can take a piece and I can look at that piece, and then I can take another piece and I can look at that piece and do the best that I can to operationally define it for the sake of the study. But I think you and I should have a conversation offline. If you want to follow up after this, that'd be great.
Sure.
Yeah.